I drafted my students into a war, and some of them did not return home. Hear me out. The first time I taught the novel, The Things They Carried, which is about the Vietnam War era, I did okay, but I didn't introduce it well enough to get them really enthused about it. And it's such a great novel and so important that I wanted to make sure I did a better job the next year. So I was brainstorming, thinking about what I wanted to do. And my friend said, "Oh, we have an extra ticket to the Billy Joel tribute musical Moving Out or whatever." And I was like, are we eating afterwards? I'll go. But I wasn't that excited about it. But when they played Goodnight Saigon, I noticed the actors on the stage all showing leaving their hometown and then going to the war, and some of them getting injured. And I had a light bulb moment where I said, I'm going to draft my students. I'm going to print up draft letters and make them, half of the class get drafted, half of the class not. And they're not going to know who is getting drafted and who isn't. I won't even know. It'll be random. These kids need to know what it was like to watch people next to them get drafted with the possibility of never coming home. So I'm thinking about this the whole day. I get home, I immediately start working. It takes me about 2 weeks to type up all of the letters, because there's 3 rounds to this draft, I'll explain, to organize everything, to put everything in envelopes. And I knew I was ready to go. So the next year, when I was ready to introduce the novel, I didn't say anything about it that much the day before. The kids came into class, and every single kid took a sealed envelope. And I had created a little movie, which had clips from Dear America, Letters from Vietnam, and some movies and some TV shows depicting, the Vietnam War. I put music like Fortunate Son and Goodnight Saigon. And after the first segment, there was a thing that flashed up on the screen that said, open your first envelope. As the kids opened their envelope, half of the class had a draft letter. And half of the class said, congratulations, you are not getting drafted. You get to do whatever you want in your future. And they had a little thing to write under each one. And as they wrote, I'm looking around the room. I don't know who got drafted because the letters are sealed. So I'm looking to see who got drafted, who didn't. They put it back in the envelope. And I would say, soldiers, come up. They would take a second envelope. Then I'd say, other people come up. They would take an envelope. They'd watch more of the film. And then it said, open envelope 2. So the people who were not drafted got to write like what their life was like 5 years after high school, 10 years after high school. The people who were drafted found out that they are in Vietnam and might not make it out, might make it out, but they have to say what they hoped they would have been able to do had they not gone to war, except for 3 kids. 3 kids got a letter that said, you have been injured badly and you will not be returning home. When I call, soldiers come up and bring your envelopes up, you stay. So everybody except 3 kids brings their second envelope with their writing up, and they each take a new envelope. I tell all of those kids to open their envelope, and it says the 3 students that will be called up as injured soldiers are about to find out that they will not make it home, and they have to tell their families whatever they wanted their families to know. And when those 3 kids came up, you could just see everybody in the class looking, because they didn't notice it, when everybody was dropping off their envelopes. And I said, injured soldiers, and the 3 stood up. And there were gasps some years to see which classmates, and everybody in the class knew that they were going to find out that they weren't going to make it home. And then the injured soldiers sit down, they open their envelope, and they wrote their letters. And it was so powerful and so connecting to these kids to feel like even a little bit, what it might be like to see somebody somebody sitting next to you in math class your whole life, and then getting drafted and going to war. And we had a lot of discussion about it, the next day, what they felt, what they saw, what they heard. And we talked about what it means to go into a war voluntarily or involuntarily. And so they had so many questions. I knew I had to take this a little bit further. So I knew some Marine veterans who were in some local groups, and I said, is there anybody who would be, you think, willing to come into my class and talk about what it was like for them in Vietnam? And this one guy said, you know, I have a friend who has never spoken about it publicly, but I'm going to ask him because I think this is an opportunity for him, almost like a catharsis, to let it out. I wasn't too optimistic about this happening, but I was like, great, thank you. If not, you know, we'll find something else. A couple days later, I get a call, very gruff voice on the other end. And he said, I'm going to come in and talk to your classes. And I want you to know, I will use the language that I use. I will talk about things. And I was just like, okay, yes, sir, fine. I talked to my administrators. They said, absolutely, let's do this. So I had 2 class periods that had this novel, and I brought the other class in. I asked for permission if they could come in to this one period so the guy would only have to speak once. And the Marine veteran comes in and he sits in the front of the class in a chair. You could hear a pin drop with 40, 50 people in my room. And he starts going through his experiences in Vietnam with every detail, with his emotions, with what he saw, with what he heard. And one of the parts that resonated with me so much and sticks with me to this day, he said, when you watch a war on film or on TV, you hear everything, you see everything, but he said, what you can't do is smell everything. And he said, that's one of the things that will never, ever leave me, are the smells of war. And we were all just like, oh my God. So he then at the very end, and this went way beyond the bell, kids were missing their lunch. They didn't care. They did not move. They listened. And when he was done, he said, you know, we never got a welcome. We thought, those of us who volunteered, we thought that we were doing the right thing and fighting for a cause. And we came back to find out people didn't like us, didn't respect us. He said, if I could tell you anything, you might not like the war, but please don't dislike the soldier. And that was his personal message for this, based on his experience. So my kids were so enthusiastic and so eager to read this book. Some of them read it twice before the unit was over. Many of them used it on the AP Lit test and did very well. So why am I telling you this story about this elaborate setup that I did for one novel? And all the time and attention it took for me to do that. Because I would not have been able to do that if I had a scripted curriculum. If I had a day by day, page by page, line by line, word for word script. And I know a lot of people deviate from it, but many people on TikTok are telling me, teachers, that their administrators look to see that they are saying the exact same thing on the exact same day. I would not have been able to be the creative professional that I was trained to be. They would have missed that entire lesson.